Hey now, it's time for another episode of Wrestling's Greatest Moments. Who would continue a wrestling show after a performer died in the ring? Who would choke out his own daughter with a pipe in a TV match? Who would start his own religion? Who would fire a wrestler on their wedding day? If you answered WWE Chairman Vince McMahon, you're in for a treat. And while you're here, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single video. Is WWE Kingpin Vince McMahon clinically insane? Or is this just a Vince McMahon world and we're living in it? We'll let you decide for yourselves as Wrestling's Greatest Moments looks at 10 reminders Vince McMahon does whatever he wants. And if you're familiar with McMahon's antics, you've probably already figured out this is the first video to cover his outrageous behavior. Number 1. Continuing over the edge after Owen Hart's death. The show must go on. That's the motto Vince McMahon has repeatedly brought up to justify his decision to continue the 1999 Over the Edge pay-per-view following the horrific death of Owen Hart. As you've likely heard, Owen died while performing a stunt where he descended from the rafters towards the ring. The beloved wrestler was prematurely released from his harness due to an equipment malfunction. He crashed into the ring, suffering catastrophic injuries. Thankfully, the WWE didn't show the accident, although it's believed that footage exists and has been hidden in the WWE's archives. Nonetheless, continuing the show demonstrated what many people saw as incredibly poor taste. As bad as the WWE's decision was, fans were subjected to announcers using what became known as the Owen voice to put over storylines that were supposed to involve grim situations. The problem, of course, that these were just that, storylines. Number 2. The Billy and Chuck Wedding. The WWE is known for its handling of delicate subjects with the same sensitivity as an elephant juggling nitroglycerin. So when the WWE introduced the ambiguously gay tag team Billy and Chuck, fans weren't sure what to expect. Billy Gunn and Chuck Palumbo entertained fans with their less than ambiguously gay antics in the ring and in various vignettes that made it look like the WWE was introducing its first gay tag team. This led to a commitment ceremony where Billy and Chuck would join in, the closest thing to holy matrimony allowed by law at the time. Even in the early 2000s, this was still a big deal, especially in an entertainment medium known for its homophobic angles. Not surprisingly, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, aka GLAAD, wanted to help the WWE with its presentation and hyped the event, giving it plenty of publicity. In 2002, the group spokesman Scott Simone discussed the storyline with the Washington Post as Billy and Chuck seemed headed towards the altar. "It's a hoot," said Simone, who is GLAAD's entertainment media director in Los Angeles and has kept an eye on Billy and Chuck's adventures. Given criticism in the 1990s that wrestling frequently glorified gay bashing, the audience, from what we've seen, appears to be cheering them on, he said. While it's entertaining for viewers, it's also enlightening. Because of its teenage audience, SmackDown reaches a lot of potential bullies and gay bashers out there. And what Billy and Chuck are saying is, not only we're here, but they're also saying, don't mess with us. GLAAD spokesperson was guardedly optimistic. "We've expressed some concern about that," Simone said. And talking to the folks at the WWE, we were told that the reason for the characters is not to set them up for a gay bashing in the ring or through audience taunts that would come later. I don't think that's what the WWE wants. What they want, what they're doing, is piggybacking on what's topical. Gay weddings are topical right now, and I have to say that bringing camp to the masses is always a good thing. GLAAD hyped the wedding, and even presented a Pottery Barn gravy boat to them on the Today Show as a wedding gift. In true Vince McMahon form, the WWE boss dropped a turd in GLAAD's gravy boat as the wedding was revealed to be a sham by Billy and Chuck, who disclosed they were straight. GLAAD was anything but, and Vince McMahon likely cackled knowing how he'd gotten free publicity. GLAAD issued the following statement: "If their behavior is any indication, Billy and Chuck are in denial about who they really are. Two gay men who love each other. The couple's actions of affection speak louder than their words of denial. At GLAAD, we know how hard it is for people in the spotlight to come out. But when Billy and Chuck are ready to let themselves be who they really are, we'll be there to support them." Simone also wrote, "We supported the representation of Billy and Chuck, not the called-off wedding. The WWE lied to us 2 months ago when they promised that Billy and Chuck would come out and wed on the air. In fact, I was lied to, the day after the show was taped in Minneapolis that the wedding took place and all was well." Number 3. Stand up for WWE. The WWE has had some sleazy angles, many of them involving Vince McMahon. So in 2010, It was time to remind the fans, and more importantly the general public, that the WWE was about more than pandering to the lowest common denominator, i.e. entertaining its fans with sex and violence. It was also a civic-minded business. In this case, the WWE called upon its fans to stand up for the WWE, whether it was writing a letter to the editor of your newspaper. Remember when newspapers were still a thing? Make "I'm standing up for WWE" your Facebook status. Remember when Facebook was still a thing? And have you read a story that's unfair to the WWE? Then email the reporter. As if it wasn't hard enough trying to be a WWE fan, the WWE was now calling on its fan base to defend it. The WWE put its money where its mouth was, posting a litany of stand up for WWE articles at its website. Here's an excerpt from a letter to Manchester, Connecticut's managing editor at the Journal Inquirer. It is with great dismay that we find it necessary to once again point out that you have made false statements of fact in the Journal Inquirer regarding the business of WWE, this time in your column on Monday, May 21st, 2012. That article clearly was intended to state that WWE is a business of violence, pornography, and general raunch. This is now at least the second time you have made false statements that damage our corporate reputation, and the second time you have stated that WWE is involved in pornography. The funniest part of this campaign was that Vinnie Mac's lovely bride Linda just happened to be running for the United States Senate that year, and opponents were having a field day by running videos of Vince's on-air antics. Coincidence? The campaign is still being talked about 12 years later, with one snarky Reddit user commenting, "I can remember them having plants in the front rows holding stand up for WWE signs. How do I know they were plants? Because they were holding up stand up for WWE signs." Regrettably, the stand up for WWE campaign didn't help Linda's political campaign, nor did the small fortune Linda drop in an attempt to win the race. According to the Los Angeles Times, Houston Mitchell, McMahon, a Republican, spent $50 million of her personal fortune in her failed 2010 campaign, and is believed to have spent approximately $47 million this time around. That's the most that any candidate has ever spent from their own pocket to win federal office. Or in Linda's case, spent all that money yet failed to capture a federal office. Number 4. Black Saturday. Here's a blast from the past that fans of the beloved territory Georgia Championship Wrestling still cringe at. December 7th, 1941 is a date which still lives in infamy, but for fans of the beloved NWA territory Georgia Championship Wrestling, Saturday, July 14th, 1984 comes close. Here's a short version of how Vince McMahon tried to buy a TV time slot on Ted Turner's superstation TBS so he could expand the WWF via cable television. Originally, Vince tried to buy time on the superstation, but Turner was happy with the highly rated World Championship Wrestling, the flagship show for Georgia Championship Wrestling, and he said no. Never one to accept no for an answer, which could explain McMahon's recent hush money scandals. Vince bought out the promotion from a group of disgruntled shareholders, in effect owning the time slot. Ted Turner wasn't happy, but when Vince said he'd provide live wrestling, Turner gave him a chance. In true Vince form, the first match was a taped squash match between Special Delivery Jones and Nick DiCarlo against the WWF Tag Team Champions Adrian Adonis and Dick Murdoch. Things quickly went downhill as Vince aired WWF reruns, reneging on his promise to offer original content. When rival promoter Jim Crockett Jr. offered to buy out the slot, Turner made the deal happen, with Crockett paying Vince a cool $1 million, which wrestling legend has it Vince used to finance WrestleMania. Number 5. Wrestling Stephanie McMahon for control of SmackDown. Nobody crosses a boss, a lesson Vince McMahon has repeatedly tried to impose on his wrestlers. However, what happens when one of his family members tries to cross him? In 2003, Stephanie McMahon was SmackDown general manager. She became aware of the two ways to do things in the WWE, the wrong way and the Vince McMahon way. Stephanie opted to do things her way, leading to Vince booking the $1 Billion Princess into an I Quit match with him, with the loser getting fired. Just to make sure there was no shenanigans, Vince made it clear that he would fire anyone who interfered in the match. Sadly for Stephanie, no one chose to go with the time-honored practice of hiding their identity under a mask. Stephanie showed plenty of guts, but in the end, she was no match for Papa Vince, who mercilessly choked her with a lead pipe until Linda McMahon threw in the towel, sparing Stephanie from any further punishment. Vince's idea of tough love makes you wonder what kind of disciplinarian he was raising his kids. Number 6. Interviewing Brian Pillman's widow. October 6, 1997 saw another wrestling tragedy as Brian Pillman's dead body was discovered the same day he was scheduled to wrestle at the WWF's Bad Blood pay-per-view. Pillman was only 35, and a history of pushing his body to the limit with alcohol and drugs led to people thinking the worst. On October 7, 1997, they saw another example of excess as Vince McMahon interviewed Brian's widow, Melanie Pillman, live on an episode of Raw. Some critics saw it as a ploy for ratings. Others saw it as a way for McMahon to downplay the WWF's responsibility, if any, for Pillman's death. McMahon defenders argued there was no ill will or hidden agendas. It was just a question of bad taste. Dave Meltzer would write in the October 13, 1997 Wrestling Observer newsletter that Melanie Pillman had reservations about going on live, but eventually consented due to her own loyalty to the company that employed her husband. Meltzer pointed out how the segment was difficult given the circumstances, but the segment left a lot of people very uneasy for many different reasons, not the least of which were all the teases and holding it off until late that made it come across as a way to build up ratings. No matter how the segment was defended, it hasn't aged well, and it earned the Wrestling Observer Newsletter's award for the most disgusting promotional tactic of 1997. This angle disgusted fans so much that they chose it over the Montreal Screwjob. The Montreal Screwjob was another case of Vince just doing whatever he wants, but we'll save that for another video. Number 7. Vince Dr. Heine segment. When former WWE announcer Jim Ross underwent colon surgery, Vince McMahon jumped all over the chance to make light of Ross's rear-end examination. On October 24, 2005, a segment aired on Raw showing Dr. Heine, aka Vince McMahon, performing surgery on Ross. The vignette featured Dr. Heine removing various objects from Ross's posterior, including a bottle of barbecue sauce, a football, an owl, Mae Young's other hand, a bag with a goldfish, an Oklahoma football helmet, a Stone Cold Steve Austin doll, and finally Jim Ross's head. The segment featured various pre-taped calls for matches Ross worked on. The alleged entertainment vignette failed to win over many fans, and it certainly didn't go over well with Ross or his wife Jan. In 2020, Ross discussed his surgery, as well as his reaction to the segment. The Dr. Heine thing was a sticking point for me because, look, I didn't see Dr. Heine when it aired live because I was on a morphine drip getting out of ICU that morning. I was in intensive care for 9 days. I had a perforated colon, and I was poisoning myself. I was about 30 days away from dying. Ross explained that while he didn't see the segment when it aired, his wife Jan did, and it made her cry. JR said he still doesn't understand exactly what motivated Vince to do the segment, but that he doesn't believe it was done in good humor. God, who knows? You know, he probably had as good an assumption as I do. I don't know why he did it. He thought it was entertaining. Everything. It's like ribbing on the square in wrestling, you know? Wrestlers are famous about not wanting to face up to the truth sometimes and making everything convenient for them. And they're ribbing on the square because I forgot, so they say this. Then someone will say it's like a woman, insulting a woman or coming on to her. Hey honey, I'm just teasing. Come on, you can't believe I'm serious about that, can you? Well, yeah, I can. So that's kind of what it was. I never did understand it. He thought it was entertaining, and that scared me, because it wasn't. However, longtime WWE writer Bruce Pritchard defended the segment. Well, first of all, it wasn't mean-spirited. And I think that a lot of people had a problem from the standpoint of the reality of JR having surgery. Now, I'm going to get a lot of for this, and I don't give a. This was done out of love. And it was done out of respect from the standpoint of this. We're going to do a skit. We're going to make fun of you. We're going to laugh at it. We're going to have fun with it because we want you to get through this. This is just another example of McMahon's warped sense of humor. The next example may have you cringing. Number 8. Vince starts his own church. In 2006, Vince McMahon began feuding with Shawn Michaels after the Heartbreak Kid told McMahon it was time to put the Montreal Screwjob behind him. Naturally, Vince didn't, and began making Shawn's life hellacious by sending his son Shane to interfere. This led to Shawn getting Vince in a one-on-one match at WrestleMania 22, where the Heartbreak Kid defeated Vince. However, Vince wasn't done, and chalked up Shawn's win to divine interference, challenging Shawn and God to battle him and son Shane at 2006's Backlash pay-per-view. Vinnie Mac went to a local house of worship, searching for the man upstairs, but to no avail. The storyline also included an in-ring segment where the ever-humble WWE kingpin said he was the Lord, Master, and God of all sports entertainment, thus he was creating his own faith. McMahonism. Vince said his religion wasn't that old, but wondered what things would have been like if McMahonism had existed before. He harkened back to Michelangelo Michelangelo's painting of Adam. Vince noted that Adam may have got the apple, but Mr. McMahon got the grapefruits. He talked about his commandments, including do not covet thy neighbor's wife, unless she's really hot. Vince even showed pictures of himself with other religious figures, such as Buddha and Pope John Paul II. The Backlash match saw Shawn Michaels accompanied by an invisible entity in the spotlight. As bad as the one-note joke was, it eventually led to Shawn Michaels and Triple H reuniting as D-Generation X. Number 9. Firing a superstar on their wedding day. As we've already shown, nobody crosses the boss in storylines, and certainly not in real life. In January 2014, WWE superstar CM Punk walked out on the WWE over growing frustrations with the way the company was treating him. The man nicknamed the Straight Edge Superstar had several complaints, including questions about the adequacy of medical care he was receiving from the WWE, as well as the company failing to have him main event the WWE's biggest show of the year, WrestleMania. Punk was undoubtedly a top star based on the way the WWE had promoted him, but he seemed to expect more. According to Punk, he was hoping to resolve matters with the WWE and was reportedly texting WWE executive Triple H about working something out once Punk returned from his honeymoon. However, Punk's happy day included an unwanted missive from the WWE, a FedEx delivery informing him his services were no longer required. During an appearance on Colt Cabana's podcast, Punk explained what transpired. The day of my wedding, I got a FedEx in the mail. It was my termination papers. I was fired. So take that, everyone who says I need to be. I'm a quitter on Twitter. I was fired on my wedding day. Very calculated, very deliberate. As much as I chuckled at it and didn't let it affect my day, I was like, once again, you pushed me too far. You pushed the wrong guy. There's no working relationship, and there never will be ever again. That wedding day thing, is pretty ridiculous. Vince McMahon claimed that the matter was a mix-up, telling Stone Cold Steve Austin during an appearance on Austin's podcast that sometimes in a big corporation, the legal people don't necessarily know what talent relations are doing, and conversely. Punk got his severance papers, moreover, on the day he got married. That was coincidence, so I want to personally apologize for that. Not everyone believes McMahon's explanation, including CM Punk, who dismissed McMahon's apology and claimed if the apology was sincere, he wouldn't use it as a publicity stunt on Austin's podcast. Number 10. Firing seemingly everyone during the pandemic. People are still dealing with the fallout from the coronavirus pandemic, a situation that paralyzed society and caused economic hardship for many individuals and businesses. Vince McMahon's "the show must go on" mentality led to him doing everything he could to run WrestleMania 26, while the rest of the world was going into full quarantine mode. What's the worst that could happen with a football stadium full of fans attending a wrestling show in the midst of the pandemic? McMahon's "what me worry" approach to the pandemic saw him continue running shows at the WWE Performance Center, despite some questions about just how seriously the WWE was taking its medical precautions. Throw in some conveniently timed campaign contributions that were made the same week that Florida designated pro wrestling as essential, and it certainly seemed McMahon was going to run the WWE, regardless of the consequences. While fans are probably happy to see the WWE provide entertainment when people were stuck at home, they didn't seem too thrilled with the WWE making mass cuts to its roster and staff at the height of the pandemic. Smaller promotions did their best to keep wrestlers on their payroll, even if they weren't running shows. The thought of a business laying off workers during a terrible time seemed cold and calculating, especially when the WWE announced it was posting record profits. As we've seen, Vince McMahon does things his way, and as you might imagine, there's plenty of other reminders that Vince does whatever he wants. Let us know if we missed any of your favorites. Meanwhile, look for more Vince being Vince videos in the near future. Share your thoughts in the comments section and let us know if there's any videos you'd like Wrestling's Greatest Moments to cover. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and spread the good news about Wrestling's Greatest Moments, the channel that celebrates the squared circle.